Welcome to She Rebel Radio, the podcast for high-performing women leaders who want to unlearn conventional rules, leave prestigious careers, and launch businesses of significance. Each week, She Rebel Radio brings you insights and advice from women entrepreneurs who transformed their prestige prisons into daring entrepreneurial success stories. Now, here is your host, Lulu Nins.
Welcome. It is episode 23 of She Rebel Radio, why we shouldn't be retaining women in prestigious positions. It is Rebel Friday and time for a new episode for a new decade. So I am excited to share with you today, She Rebels, a little bit of a controversial, me playing devil's advocate of why we shouldn't be retaining women in prestigious positions. And trust me, it is so not like me to play devil's advocate. It's actually what I live and breathe for as an ex-defence lawyer and as a coach, is to always flip the script and change perspective. And what I will say is this isn't for every single woman. We definitely need women in prestigious positions, but we definitely shouldn't be retaining them is the first point. And secondly, we also need women exiting those prestigious positions. And that is what I'm going to share with you in this episode, which is loaded with some adversity to start the brand new year. And I've got some amazing guests coming up for you in 2020 and also some amazing solo shows that are planned and coming your way. So if you haven't already, do hit subscribe. We would be so grateful for any reviews that you can share on Apple, iTunes, or whatever platform that you use, because that really helps support getting the She Rebel Radio podcast out to the right women. So thank you so much for being here. I'm always super grateful. And you know a little bit about my story if you've heard She Rebel Radio before or followed me elsewhere on social media, but you know, it's that 5 years, just over 5 years, that I left my prestigious position as a criminal defence litigator, head of department. And, you know, there was so much going on at the end of 2014 in terms of the reasons why I shouldn't be leaving. And it was 11 years that I'd been in that position. We were bidding for a big criminal litigation contract at the time. I was head of department. I'd just been interviewed for partnership, but I had in fact started my first business, which wasn't the right freaking business for me, but I really enjoyed the process. I've done it all the wrong way and the right way, ladies. That's why I do what I do now. But I wasn't someone who needed to be retained in that position. In fact, I had sat for 2 years ignoring my intuition and feelings that wasn't where I was meant to be anymore. And these feelings of being exhausted and burnt out, but also feeling trapped, feeling caged, feeling suffocated, were just getting louder and louder. And I'm pretty sure I made that obvious to everyone I was working with at that time as well. I was not a woman who was meant to be retained in my prestigious position. And it may be that you're not a woman who's meant to be retained in your prestigious position in 2020 and beyond. So let's consider the facts here. There is a stampede of women leaving middle management, but more so those higher executive positions like partnership and so on, at 3 times, triple the rate of men. So it's around 24% of women and 7% of men, according to the the network of executive women. And also there has been a Law Society report from the UK headed by Christina Blacklaw, really looking at the stampede of women in the legal profession. There is an equal number of women entering, and the higher up you go, the less women there are and women are leaving. And I am a statistic, ladies. I am one of those statistics. And what I can say is, had I received partnership at the end of 2014, I wouldn't have even lasted the year. So I would have been even more in that higher statistic bracket than I was even living at middle management. Okay. And, I knew for 2 years. I knew pretty much as I hit middle management, probably a year in, actually, this is not what I thought it was. This is not where I want to be right now. So let's look at the reasons that are being given for why women are leaving. And I quite often, if you bump into me at a networking event or something over a glass of wine, I'll usually be on a rant about this kind of stuff in terms of, we've looked at flexible working. I think flexible working is great. It's certainly something that I've created within my business. But guess what? It wasn't the reason that I left. Even though I was working out of hours at the police station, then doing trials the next day, working 12 days in a row, it wasn't the reason I left. The burnout that came with that, absolutely the reason I left. Equal pay, another thing that has been quoted and looked at. It wasn't even something that I considered particularly, but yeah, it wasn't the reason that I left. Sexual harassment absolutely exists in the legal profession. Wasn't the reason I left. They were all little things potentially floating around in the background. There was another reason that's been quoted is unconscious bias. We'll look at that in a minute, so highlight that one. There was also lack of grit. When I was doing some more research around this to prepare this episode, there is a movement in America in helping women with the grit and the mindset that's needed. I think that's amazing. But I was also a little bit offended because I'm one of those statistics and I don't lack grit at all. As a criminal defense lawyer and litigator, grit is not something I lack. For jumping, head first to start a business with something I knew nothing about in a completely different field, grit is not something that I lack. I work with my clients frequently on really finding that grit and anchoring that grit. I tell you what, it's not something that they don't have. They already have it. It's just about reconnecting with it. They wouldn't be in the positions that they've been in and really getting out there and starting their businesses if they didn't lack grit. So I am a bit offended by that one. There's even lack of ambition, which what I find is actually the opposite. It's not that there's a lack of ambition, it's that ambition is not being met in those prestigious positions. It's that the higher you go, the more you can actually find that you lack that significance. Certainly when I went to law school, I wanted to change the world. I wanted to change so many things, but I got beaten down by becoming part of the system. And that is really, with the unconscious bias tied into it, the reasons I believe, being one of those statistics, that women are stampeding from those positions because we can't change anything when we get there. We become part of the system. Christina Blacklaw, in her report for the Law Society on really advocating for change, and they interviewed all around the world, it was around 712 women, female lawyers, but I don't know, what I couldn't grasp hold of is I think there were women still in those positions. So I don't know how accurate some of that would be, because it would have been interesting to interview 12 women that had already left. But I might be wrong on that. Always put my hands up if I'm wrong on that, but I think they are women still practicing. But she talks about the masculine shape of law and the masculine traits that women need to adopt to climb those ranks. And I massively resonate with that. And if you are feeling exhausted, trapped, caged, and suffocated by that masculine shape of whatever that you're in and the masculine traits that you need to climb and play the game, that may well resonate with you as well. And what I would love to do is let's look at this word retain. This is what I have a real issue about as well. Always want a story to start the new year on a rant. But retain and the use of that word, which I see across the board on LinkedIn, and I think it's great. Amazing women and men doing work to, keep, and a simple version is keep women in these prestigious positions. We do need women in those positions of significance. But even the use of the word retain, when we unpick that, it means to own. It means property. It means possession of something. It means control. It means safeguard. Haven't women had enough of being controlled, of being possessed, of being seen as property, of being owned or safeguarded or kept. So much so unconscious is that bias that word is being used in the same sentence of retaining women. We've spent over 5,000 years, ladies, being retained. So if you are one of those women that is really wanting to break out of that being retained, then you are not going crazy. You are feeling those nudges and those callings for a reason. And so many people will try and talk you out of that. We're going to talk about that on a later episode because this is, not for today. But, we are living in a world still where we are expected to fit into patriarchal versions of success. That we are expected to be contained within its structures and systems and its rules, and to do things in a way that's masculine is valued, and masculine principles of success are valued on a really deep unconscious level, even by yourself. And interestingly, whilst preparing and recording this episode of She Rebel Radio for you ladies, it's been 100 years since women have been able to enter the legal profession. And there has been much discussion online, etc. around this issue, in particular with Women's Hour, a full episode with Sherry Blair and Dana Dennis-Smith, the founder of First 100 Years, who's conducted a large amount of research that has concluded only 2% of women believe that there is true equality in the legal profession, which again adds to the fact of this masculine shape of the law, and the law simply actually being a representation of other very similar environments of accountancy, banking, all of that kind of stuff, all the kind of professions that the clients that come to work with me are from. And talking in that episode of Women's Hour, the back history of women being excluded from the legal profession and ruled as not even being people. So the Law Society and Bar Council didn't have to include us with, being a governing body and allowing women to enter the profession. We were also told what to wear up until the mid-1990s. We were not allowed to wear trouser suits. That was only a good, 10 years after I entered the profession in 2003. So we have been deemed not as people. We've been told what to wear. We've been told how to behave. And Sherry Blair reported Lord Denning, the famous Lord Denning. Anyone who, has been to law school knows about Lord Denning and the amount of famous judgments that he made during his career whilst he celebrated her success, said this isn't really a place for women. The bar is not really the place for women. And Grenville, writing a very famous legal text, actually has in there, in black and white, that women's voices cannot travel as far as men. And we see that in the political world and, the court systems of this, shouting, this loud behaviour, which quite frankly, I can't even watch on TV now. So it's a really interesting episode. I definitely recommend that, and we'll put a link to that in the show notes for this episode of She Rebel Radio. But I want to build on a few points that were made within that. Sherry Blair talked about, women having the same equal opportunities for all women and not just the exceptional few. And I absolutely agree with that. But what I say and what I feel is that doesn't go far enough, because that still indicates that we are being accepted, approved of. We're fitting in and squeezing ourselves to fit in and be equal to men in a world designed by men for men that has been shaped by masculinity, or what we deem to be masculine systems and structures of success, i.e. equals patriarchy. There has to be a space for women in the legal profession, other similar professions, to be able to change things and introduce feminine principles and really look at the purpose and the practices beneath the things that have been there for so long that we don't even question them. And Abby Silver, I can't remember if she was a barrister or solicitor, but anyway, a lawyer who, and if you're listening from the US, there are different things here in the UK, but I know in the US there is no difference. talks, about we really need to start changing the narrative and, promoting people, promoting women, not just for the amount of money they make, but for the different reasons. And that was something that was massively supported. And that is touching on the point of there needs to be space for feminine principles and a feminine shaping of the law, of banking, of accountancy, of all of those things. And whilst I labour this point in terms of this podcast episode, is because does equality go far enough? And how do we introduce feminine principles to those patriarchal systems and structures? And as you know, I was a litigator and I was, 19 when I was going in my first prisons and things like that. And, those systems and structures were very much built on the foundation of a patriarchy. Okay. So the reason I bring this up is because we are, and I'm a massive advocate, and we do need to support women who are staying in those positions and changing it from the inside out. But some of us, and you may be one of those women who's listening right now, who's removed yourself or is in the process of wanting to remove yourself, we also need women to exit those prestigious positions, because sometimes it takes that leaving, it takes that removing yourself and exiting from a prestigious position to view the narrative differently, to create a new narrative, to have the experiences that you've had, and to really have that bird's eye outside perspective, a wider view on a problem that is so unconscious that when you're in it, you cannot always see it. And it's crucial that women are exiting to create their own narratives, platforms, and businesses with that space that we talked about for women to be able to change things. Exclusion is the key to diversity. Women were excluded from the legal system, from other systems and structures where it was built on a masculine shaping. And it's very difficult for us to change that within it. It's not that we can't. We need women within there doing that, but we also need women outside of that, creating new narratives, new foundations for business and new platforms, and being inspired by that. And, podcasts just like this. So I'm sorry, Grenville, women's voice can travel just as far as men, and we now have the technology to be able to support us to do so. So if you are feeling like you are one of those women who has had your wings clipped, that you feel that you're suffocating within those systems and structures, and that those edges and confines need to disappear. I know that I quoted the Maya Angelou book, I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings. That's certainly how I felt after 11 years in the legal profession. And for me, the story was that I needed to remove myself, to find my own narrative, to find my own platform and create a business that was really true to me on feminine principles of success. And I help other women do the same, women from all different professions that have felt exactly the same. So we need to support the women who are bold enough and brave enough to remove themselves and build their new arenas from scratch. That is just as important as it is to supporting the women who are remaining in those professions. Because as women, we have never had the opportunity before to create our own narratives, our platforms and our businesses, and to have shows and things like this where we can share our thoughts, our beliefs, what it is that we deem important without the restriction, without the rules, without the systems and without the structures. And we know that women are actually punished more harshly than men for breaking those rules, those systems and those structures. And I'm going to put it to you ladies that the feminine narrative, the feminine principles are actually quite wild at heart, wilder than you can really see right now, because they have been so trodden down that we don't even know how to access them. And true to the fact of that is LinkedIn. I love LinkedIn. I've talked about it a couple of times on this episode already. When I shared, which episode was it? Episode number 8 of menstruation, being an authority for women, being a power. I think there was maybe 1 or 2 likes, but not as many likes as there was for the other episodes of She Rebel Radio, because women are scared to talk about this stuff, because we have needed to change ourselves to become like men to fit into that world. world. But this is the century, this next 100 years is about creating a new narrative. And you can do that within those professions, or you can remove yourself and do it outside of that. And if that is what you're wanting to do, then I would love to speak to you for a breakout strategy session with me and to tell you about my 24 Principles to Feminine Success course, which is so powerful. You will see exactly what I'm talking about throughout all of the She Rebel Radio episodes of creating this new narrative for you, for those women that are brave and bold enough to leave those prestigious positions and start businesses of significance. And you will see how much masculine principles are favoured over the feminine ones wherever you go, and I would love to share that with you. So if you want to have one of those calls with me, I'm going to drop the link in the comments. I hope you've enjoyed this episode. I would love to hear some feedback and questions from you on anything that I've said today. Controversy is always welcome by me, and if you've loved the show, please don't hesitate to leave us a review and share with those women who need to hear the message today.
Thanks for listening to She Rebel Radio, the podcast for high-performing women leaders who want to unlearn conventional rules, leave prestigious careers, and launch businesses of significance. She Rebel Radio is executive produced and hosted by women's advocate and coach Lulu Mims. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure to subscribe so you never miss another episode. You can find Lulu Mims on Facebook and LinkedIn at Lulu Mims and on Instagram at LuluMims_biz. Until next week, keep rebelling against the rules and designing success your way.